I purchased a pristine property for my sibling, only for him to bar me from his ceremony hosted on that very land. The estate was valued at over $750,000, complete with a beautiful manicured lawn and a sprawling oak tree. Yet, when the invitations were sent out, my name was completely omitted. He forgot one crucial detail, though. The entire asset remained legally registered under my name alone. So, as the guests gathered to celebrate his big day on my dollar, I was quietly authorizing a listing agreement with a local agency. What occurred when his new spouse discovered the deception caused an immediate, breathless chill across the entire gathering. He had slammed the entrance in my face, completely blind to the reality that I owned the keys. Welcome back to Quiet Justice Tales. I am Elena, a 32-year-old financial manager residing in the scenic hills of North Carolina. For more than a decade, I operated as the designated pillar of my household, managing overdue invoices, settling unexpected debts, and securing an upscale residence my brother could never dream of financing independently. This narrative documents how I was excluded from the threshold I single-handedly funded, and the precise steps I took to reclaim my security. If you have ever sacrificed your own comfort only to receive disrespect in return, subscribe to Quiet Justice Tales and share your thoughts below. Our mother, Beatrice, passed away when I reached 22. A swift battle with advanced illness left us empty in less than 2 months. My father, Arthur, sank into his favorite armchair following the memorial service, opened a cold beverage, and effectively checked out from reality. My younger brother, Julian, was 19 at the time, sleeping past mid-afternoon and relying on others to fulfill his basic daily needs. Someone had to sustain our household. Someone had to handle the heavy financial obligations on our family home in the suburbs. Someone had to physically transport Julian to his higher education courses, then retrieve his belongings when he abandoned the program a few weeks later. That burden fell squarely on me. I maintained 2 parallel positions, working daylight hours at a tax office handling inquiries, and midnight shifts organizing inventory at a commercial shipping facility. Eventually, I pursued an accounting specialization in evening courses, recognizing that if I was destined to resolve everyone else's chaotic errors, I should at least be adequately compensated for it. 4 years passed this way. I successfully completed my qualification at 26 completely debt-free, covering every single tuition payment using an isolated digital ledger on my phone, allocating small sums whenever a surplus emerged. By that phase, I regularly forwarded Julian hundreds of dollars monthly to cover housing, sustenance, and whatever manufactured emergency he generated that particular week. Our mother had spoken to me shortly before her departure, propped up against hospital pillows with her vision aid still intact, appearing ready to organize her own medical statements. She whispered, "Protect your brother. You possess the inner resilience." I interpreted that directive completely literally, perhaps far too rigidly. Yet, when a beloved person requests something with their concluding breaths, you do not bargain over the specifics, nor do you request reimbursement. You simply carry the obligation forward, even when the sheer gravity begins to fracture your composure at dawn. Julian was never an inherently malicious individual. I want to emphasize that clearly. He was simply my younger sibling, possessing our mother's expressive gaze, and during his early teens, he would prepare warm beverages for me while I studied, claiming my mind required sustenance. The core issue was that Julian never grasped the relationship between personal labor and survival because I constantly closed the deficit for him. He secured a hospitality position at 20, lasting barely a fraction of a year before resigning over perceived slights from management. He transitioned into automotive retail, surviving 12 months before dismissal resulted from manipulating vehicle history logs, an action he framed as innovative bookkeeping, which as an actual certified professional, I found deeply insulting. A subsequent logistical position lasted 6 months, abandoned because the operational schedule was deemed unreasonable, meaning it commenced at sunrise. Every consecutive week, my device would signal a new crisis. A slight deficit had occurred. A minor deficit translated to several $100s needed immediately for rent, utilities, and a pickup vehicle he had no business financing. I forwarded the funds without exception. Julian was not wicked, he simply never had an incentive to mature because my presence ensured his failures carried no real consequences. When you act as a permanent safety net, The individual eventually stops perceiving the safety line altogether, viewing the open sky as their own natural flight. Our father exacerbated the issue. Arthur would contact me stating, "Your sibling is navigating a challenging phase," as if Julian's entire adult trajectory was not a perpetual challenging phase with scenic overlooks. Arthur never instructed Julian to organize his existence, nor did he explain that his sister was supporting multiple households on a modest corporate income. Arthur simply opened another beverage and assumed everything would resolve itself. Julian did not resolve it. My father parted ways with his manufacturing employer at 58, not by personal preference. His physical mobility declined, prompting him to accept an early retirement package because contesting the corporate decision required vitality he simply lacked. He secured a minimal monthly stipend alongside public assistance, retaining the modest suburban property that mother had once decorated beautifully with vintage drapery and vibrant flora. He permitted the structure to gradually deteriorate around him, leaving surfaces unpainted, drainage systems compromised, and the garden boxes entirely neglected. His nightly pattern remained identical: the recliner, the television controller, the beverage, then sleep. He displayed no malice or hostility, he was merely hollow. It felt as though his internal engine ceased when mother departed, running exclusively on fading momentum ever since. His affection for Julian required zero active participation. Julian was expressive, constantly present, and persistently demanding. Exhibiting dependency closely resembled emotional intimacy to a parent who had abandoned the concept of true connection. My position was completely antithetical. I requested absolutely nothing from Arthur. I checked on his health weekly, forwarded funds when his transportation required mechanical maintenance, and functioned as the hidden framework keeping the roof stable while others admired the exterior facade. My father did not harbor resentment toward me, he simply overlooked my existence, which proved far more agonizing. Resentment implies an active connection, requiring someone to observe you long enough to form a perspective. Arthur perceived me as an empty pane of glass, offering a view he never fully focused upon. Julian received the affection, the regular communication, and the constant affirmation. I received only the void between mandatory check-ins and the absolute certainty that Elena required no assistance because Elena was perpetually capable. 2 annual cycles ago, Julian lost his logistics employment and faced displacement from his residence concurrently. Predictably, he had neglected his housing obligations for a quarter of a year, concealing the legal warnings beneath his bedding like a child hiding an unfavorable academic report. Arthur contacted me in complete distress, genuine weeping, a sound I had not witnessed since our mother's departure. "Your sibling is completely displaced, Elena. He is inhabiting his vehicle." I journeyed to the family home that weekend. Julian was indeed residing in his vehicle within Arthur's driveway, consuming processed food and appearing like an abandoned pet still anticipating a reward. I possessed the capability to finance another lease, providing initial deposits or validating the contract. However, I had spent a decade repairing his structural collapses, and my patience was exhausted. Consequently, I identified a property, a beautiful 4-bedroom suburban home with a spacious garage and a mature oak tree, valued near $800,000. I successfully closed the purchase at $770,000. I allocated $154,000 in cash, the culmination of 8 years of strict budgeting, packing my own sustenance daily, and operating an aging sedan with a damaged dashboard, and I maintained the legal title exclusively under my name. "Here are the parameters," I stated, presenting the legal contract at Arthur's dining table. "You will occupy the space and satisfy the monthly carrying costs of $3,900. Once you maintain verified employment for 24 continuous months and fulfill every obligation punctually, I will officially convey ownership." Julian agreed instantly, as if receiving an absolute fortune. He finalized the agreement with an embrace, occupying the residence the subsequent week while announcing to every acquaintance, "I finally secured my own estate." He deliberately omitted my contribution entirely. A young medical professional named Clara entered Julian's life roughly 1 year into his residency. She was 27, working demanding shifts at a local intensive care unit, possessing that unwavering composure that develops from confronting mortality daily and navigating dense traffic without losing equilibrium. She had financed her own education independently, utilizing no inheritance or convenient shortcuts. Her family operated a regional landscaping enterprise, and her younger sister was finalizing an educational qualification nearby. They were respectable, grounded individuals. Julian introduced Clara to the residents on a weekend afternoon, having contacted me the prior evening to guarantee I would not make an unannounced appearance. He guided her through the entrance, displaying the premium kitchen amenities I had selected, the spacious master suite, and the beautiful backyard. "This is my achievement," he declared. Clara accepted the statement because no reason existed to doubt him. She stood within an elegant residence alongside a proud partner, entirely unaware that a legal title reposed in a secure filing unit in the city bearing an entirely different designation. I visited the location 2 weeks later, encountering Clara. She was a gracious, direct individual who greeted me warmly, remarking, "Julian is remarkably proud of what he accomplished here. It is genuinely extraordinary." I directed my gaze toward my brother, who kept his eyes fixed on the carpeting. Afterwards, I emphasized that he must inform her regarding the true financial reality. He leaned against the premium surfaces I purchased and countered, "When the circumstances align, I will." That alignment was an illusion. It was never intended to manifest, because the truth would strip away his exceptional facade, rendering him ordinary to the first person who viewed him as remarkable. Julian requested her hand 8 months subsequent, kneeling beneath that very oak tree. Clara accepted the proposal. I received the news from Arthur on a weekday evening, sounding more enthusiastic than he had in years. "Your sibling is entering marriage, Elena. Can you comprehend it?" I could comprehend the event, but the operational strategy left me astonished. The ceremony would occur at the residence, utilizing the backyard space beneath the tree. Clara adored that specific landmark, sharing with everyone that it marked the location where Julian first declared his devotion, and she wished to exchange vows in that identical space, encircled by relatives within the home they intended to establish together. The family arrived for a celebratory gathering at the property. The parents journeyed from their hometown, joining the sister in the living space I had fully furnished using my personal credit lines, consuming a meal at the table I had personally financed while complimenting Julian on his spectacular property. The father shook his hand, stating, "An individual capable of securing an estate of this caliber is fully prepared to protect my child." Julian accepted the praise without offering any clarification whatsoever. 6 weeks prior to the event, I journeyed to the property, confronting both Julian and Arthur at the dining table, the identical surface where the initial paperwork had been displayed. "Disclose the reality before the ceremony," I demanded. "She is entitled to the facts." Julian remained defiant, while Arthur focused entirely on his beverage, muttering, "Your sibling understands his strategy." I returned to the city along the highway with my windows lowered, my jaw clenched so forcefully that the physical strain dominated my awareness. 6 weeks. The communication arrived on a Wednesday afternoon while I was auditing financial files for a commercial enterprise. Julian's name illuminated my screen, and I answered anticipating an economic request, perhaps funding for the culinary services or an inquiry regarding liability coverage, an area Julian remained entirely ignorant about since he lacked any actual insurance policies on a structure that did not belong to him. "Greetings," he stated casually, as though inquiring about local weather conditions. "So, look. Clara and I have refined the attendee list, and we are restricting the volume significantly. It is reserved exclusively for the immediate family." I permitted the declaration to linger in the silence between us, refusing to break the tension. "Julian," I responded quietly, "I am your sister." "I comprehend that," he countered, "but this is Clara's specialized day, and we require absolute intimacy. Frankly, your connection with us is somewhat distant, so it would feel inappropriate." I terminated the communication immediately. I remained stationary for 11 minutes, watching the digital indicator on my workstation transition slowly. Afterwards, I contacted Arthur. "Father, Julian has informed me that I am excluded from the wedding." A heavy pause ensued, followed by the sound of a container opening. "The event is restricted to the immediate family, Elena." You grasp the situation, correct? That was my father, the individual whose lifestyle I had subsidized for a decade, whose mechanical failures I had repaired, who ignored my existence until a crisis emerged. I answered, I grasped the situation perfectly, father. I ended the call, and within moments, a digital notification arrived from Julian, a brief phrase accompanied by a bright yellow smiling emblem. It is reserved for the immediate family, followed by that mocking graphic, as if suggesting a venue was completely occupied and I should seek accommodations elsewhere. I remained at my workstation, the commercial spreadsheets still displayed before me. I minimized the data, opening the secure lower compartment containing my essential legal documents, the financing agreements, the authentic deed, the protective insurance policies, and the property evaluation featuring my personal endorsement on every page. I retrieved my device, contacting a trusted regional real estate broker. Helen, I require the immediate listing of a residential asset. I communicated the location details, which she accessed instantly. Elena, this represents the dwelling where your sibling resides. Correct. Are you entirely resolved on this choice? I have never possessed greater certainty regarding any action. If it is reserved exclusively for the immediate family, let it be so. The immediate family was about to discover the authentic name embedded in the property registry. If you have ever surrendered every resource available, your capital, your time, your hard-earned security, and your rest only to be denied a place at the gathering, then you comprehend precisely the impact of that digital emblem. You recognize the sensation when the individuals you sustained determine you are not significant enough to stand beside them. Support this video with a like if you have experienced similar betrayals, because the true resolution is just commencing. The broker was a seasoned professional exceeding 60 years of age, possessing 3 decades of transactional experience in the region. She was not easily startled. Yet, when I entered her office the following morning presenting the authentic title, the financial statements, and the insurance records, she observed me over her lenses and requested, clarify the precise dynamics of this scenario once more. I detailed the parameters clearly. Purchased the asset 24 months ago, title registered exclusively to me, sibling occupying the structure. No formal lease existed, no financial contract was active, and no written covenant was established. It was entirely a verbal understanding that Julian would cover the carrying costs to earn the title transfer, an obligation he completely abandoned, failing to maintain any employment for more than 5 months consecutively while I sustained every transaction from my city apartment. The broker organized the documentation, noting that local regulations mandated a 30-day notice period to any residential occupant prior to forced relocation, regardless of lease status. I recognize the ceremony occurs in 4 weeks, she remarked, observing my expression. She understood my intent immediately. You desire the listing activated? Immediately. And the legal notification? Dispatched via certified delivery today. She initiated the property network on her terminal, evaluating comparable assets for the 4-bedroom suburban home. We can position the entry at $785,000. The market exhibits significant strength. I finalized the authorization before midday, seated in that office with a clear perspective born from being pushed beyond all reasonable limits by the individuals who should have protected me. The formal legal notification went out that very afternoon, directed to Julian at the residence, formally endorsed by Elena as the lawful proprietor. My legal representative was a meticulous specialist in estate preservation, occupying a premium urban suite and possessing the calm demeanor of a professional who had witnessed every conceivable variation of domestic property conflict throughout his career. I sat opposite him as he reviewed the deed, the mortgage tracking, and the active marketing agreement, evaluating each component with absolute precision. The title is completely unblemished, he confirmed. Sole ownership belongs to Elena. No external claims exist beyond the primary financing which bears your name exclusively. Your sibling retains zero legal entitlement to this asset, he is simply an occupant lacking a formal agreement. The 30-day notification aligns perfectly with statutory requirements. He adjusted his attire slightly, pausing. Elena, I must confirm your commitment to this scheduling. The ceremony is set for 4 weeks from now. The notification arrives immediately, expiring precisely around the date of the wedding. I am fully aware, I replied. He leaned back, observing me with a perspective that mixed professional validation with deep understanding. Understood completely. The broker contacted me later that afternoon. The property entry had gone live, generating multiple viewing requests within hours. The dwelling was immaculate. I had ensured its premium quality during the initial purchase, because if I was allocating my entire security to sustain my sibling, I intended for the asset to be exceptional. Multiple viewings were scheduled immediately, while in the suburbs, a certified legal delivery was advancing through the postal infrastructure, a recorded tracking number detailing the approach of a reality check to a man currently selecting decorations for a celebration on land he did not possess. Julian and Clara were completely immersed in event preparations. I monitored this through Clara's public digital updates. She had committed no offense against me, and I harbored no desire to restrict an innocent individual whose only error was placing trust in my brother. She uploaded images of the outdoor space adorned with illumination, the construction of a ceremonial arch beneath the massive oak tree, and a short looping video of Julian mounting a decorative welcome display above the main entrance. I contemplated that image for an extended duration. Clara's family arrived from their hometown the subsequent weekend, assisting with the interior floral arrangements. Her father traversed the perimeter with Julian, evaluating the boundaries and organizing the placement of hospitality services for the reception. I could easily envision Julian out there, projecting the image of a successful property owner who had sacrificed and secured every square foot independently. It required significant endurance to acquire this asset, Julian remarked to her father, a statement I discovered because Clara shared it online as an inspirational quotation regarding her partner's dedication to their dream home. I deactivated the application, accessing my actual financial portal instead. A substantial payment was due in 12 days, an obligation I would fulfill because the asset and the credit rating belonged exclusively to me, and Julian had failed to contribute a single dollar for 4 consecutive months. Amidst the preparation, Clara inquired about me. A digital update from her sister revealed her stating, "I genuinely desire to meet his sibling." Julian merely dismissed the inquiry, claiming, "We lack a close relationship." A distant relationship, stated by an individual residing entirely on my charity, while my certified delivery was riding in a postal transport along the interstate, days from arrival. The broker contacted me on a Thursday with a cash proposal at $779,000, requesting a rapid 14-day resolution. I sat within my modest urban apartment, a single-chamber space overlooking a vehicle enclosure, featuring a cooking area so restricted I had to maneuver uncomfortably to access the refrigeration unit. I allocated $1,100 monthly for this space while maintaining a $3,900 obligation on a suburban estate where my brother was orchestrating a celebration I was explicitly barred from attending. "Elena, are you functional?" the broker inquired. "I am here. Authorize the transaction." A 2-week resolution placed the finalization precisely on a specific Saturday. The broker hesitated. The Saturday of the ceremony. I calculated the financial metrics, transaction value at $779,000, remaining obligation near $590,000, operational expenses and transaction fees hovering around $34,000. The resulting equity returned to me would be approximately $155,000. My initial capital allocation had been $154,000. I was destined to recover almost precisely my starting principal, minus the 2 years of monthly carrying costs I had sustained on Julian's behalf. Financially, I incurred a deficit, but possessing those funds securely in my account far surpassed retaining a structure that functioned exclusively as a monument to my brother's deception. "Proceed with the finalization," I instructed. I terminated the call, surveying my restricted surroundings, the view of the parking structure, the compact cooking space, and the workstation where I completed secondary financial auditing on weekends to cover the deficit created by Julian's lifestyle. My motivation was not purely punitive. I liquidated the asset because it belonged to me, because I had occupied that registration office completely alone 2 years prior, endorsing every page and surrendering a financial instrument that contained my entire economic existence. I had executed that alone. It was my property, and I retained the absolute right to liquidate it. That evening, rest eluded me. I remained awake, contemplating the past, remembering Julian at 13 bringing me sustenance during my long study sessions, claiming my intellect required support. I recalled him at 10 weeping because peers ridiculed his aged footwear, and how our mother comforted him, stating those items had guided him safely to her side, rendering them invaluable. I remembered him at 19 standing beside her final resting place in an ill-fitting suit, appearing like a child mimicking an adult, and how I placed my arm around him, promising absolute protection. The oak tree in that yard was a primary factor in his property selection. He claimed it evoked memories of the landmark mother sat beneath in our childhood yard, reading her literature on summer evenings while the insects illuminated the twilight. I almost contacted the broker to cancel the transaction, desperate to identify an alternative resolution. Being protective should never mean allowing yourself to be entirely erased. Then I retrieved my device, rereading Julian's text message. It is reserved exclusively for the immediate family, accompanied by that mocking emblem, a dismissive circle that reduced a decade of personal sacrifice to an absolute irrelevance. I deactivated the device, extinguishing the illumination. The transaction would proceed, the transfer would occur. If Julian desired to exchange vows beneath an oak tree on land owned by a completely unknown entity, that remained his personal choice. But it was my name being removed from the public registry, not his, and I had earned the absolute privilege to determine when my association with that document ceased. I slept peacefully after that realization, my first complete rest in weeks. The following evening, I retrieved the initial acquisition folder from my records. I had not opened the directory since the closing 2 years prior. Everything was perfectly categorized with the precise indicators I utilize for all financial documentations, because order is foundational to my profession. The initial section contained the purchase covenant, buyer, Elena Marie. The address detailed my modest urban apartment. Signed, validated, and initialed throughout. The secondary section held the physical assessment report, 26 pages bearing my endorsement at the conclusion of every sheet. I recalled the structural inspector, an individual who consumed excessive coffee and possessed strong perspectives regarding ventilation systems. I remembered standing within the vacant structure completely alone, traversing the rooms, evaluating the windows, and inspecting every storage space. Julian was absent, Arthur was absent. There was only myself, the specialist, and a documentation board. The tertiary section preserved the down payment documentation, $154,000, a certified instrument issued from my financial institution. The representative had inquired if the residence was intended for my personal occupancy, and I had responded that it was for my brother. She offered a warm expression, calling it the most generous act she had witnessed all week. The final section contained the title preservation policy, sole owner, Elena Marie. No secondary investor, no alternative beneficiary, just myself. I sat at my workstation holding those physical elements, the material confirmation of every single dollar I had generated, preserved, and transferred. And I contemplated Julian's message once more, it is reserved exclusively for the immediate family. The immediate family. Yet, those immediate individuals did not occupy the registration office, nor did they validate 26 pages of structural assessments. They did not surrender a financial instrument representing 8 years of extreme frugality, weekend labor, a damaged sedan, and a view of a vehicle enclosure. I purchased a residence for my sibling, and he barred me from the entrance. The legal records detailed the remaining reality. The certified delivery arrived on a Tuesday morning. I am aware of the exact moment because my device signaled the verification at 11:23. Exactly 14 minutes later, Julian initiated a call. I permitted the device to signal without responding. He initiated a secondary attempt. I maintained the silence. A third attempt ensued, and when telephonic access failed, the digital messages commenced. What represents this document? You lack the authority to liquidate my property. This constitutes an absolute fabrication, correct? Contact me immediately. I delayed my response for an hour before transmitting a single clarification. It does not constitute your property. It never did. Evaluate the public registry. 20 minutes of silence followed before he countered. You are projecting a bluff. I offered no further engagement. Julian contacted Arthur, who subsequently contacted me. I answered because I desired to discover my father's perspective when the underlying reality became visible. Elena, your sibling is highly agitated. He claims you are liquidating the residence. I am. You lack the authorization to perform that action. That represents his home. It represents my property, father. My name occupies the title, my capital secured the transaction, and my credit sustains the financing. Your mother would experience profound disappointment in your actions. I permitted that statement to register, remaining within my consciousness for precisely the duration required. Then I responded, Mother would have evaluated the title documentation. Arthur terminated the connection immediately. I placed the device on my workstation. I remain unaware of the precise dynamics in the suburbs that afternoon, whether Julian paced the floors, expressed physical frustration, or sat beneath the oak tree attempting to comprehend how his permanent safety net had suddenly dissolved. What remains verified is his subsequent choice. He elected to conceal the reality from Clara, betting that I was merely bluffing, assuming I would never actually execute the liquidation 48 hours prior to his ceremony, confident that the sister who had sustained him for a decade would shield him one final time. He miscalculated catastrophically. Ceremony week arrived, featuring 2 operational timelines unfolding parallel across 68 miles. In the suburbs, Clara was organizing floral arrangements, white variants, delicate elements, and aromatic greenery. She uploaded a digital tour of the outdoor space, displaying the seating arrangements, the structural arch beneath the oak tree, and a handcrafted sign declaring best day ever positioned against the perimeter enclosure. She appeared genuinely radiant, and I experienced a complex emotional reaction to that visualization, an abstract sensation lacking a clean definition, because Clara was entirely innocent, and the impending disruption was never intended for her detriment. In the city, I occupied my representative's office on Wednesday, finalizing the transaction documentations. The purchase value reached $779,000, acquired by a transitioning couple desiring a weekend retreat in the Highlands. The transaction became legally active on Saturday, the title transfer, the registration, the entire operational sequence. It was structured for Saturday because that marked the clearance of the acquiring funds, enabling the title entity to record the transfer formally. The brokerage team was scheduled to mount the sold indicator at 5 in the evening. The ceremony was arranged for 3. I endorsed every specific page while the representative validated the signatures. The documentation was filed for Saturday recording, and I returned to my apartment. I prepared a standard meal, protein, grains, and greens, the identical menu I utilize every Wednesday because predictability sustains my stability. I sat at my dining table, consuming my meal alone, contemplating Clara organizing floral elements in a structure destined to belong to absolute strangers by the conclusion of the week. 2 distinct timelines, 2 women possessing minimal acquaintance, each executing what they perceived as correct, separated by 68 miles. One of us was destined to navigate a catastrophic Saturday. I maintained absolute awareness of the destination, and it was not my reality. I experienced no pride regarding the scenario, yet remorse was entirely absent as well. The evening prior to the ceremony, at 7 o'clock, an intense, rapid knock reverberated against my apartment entrance. Upon opening the door, Julian was visible, wearing unpressed attire, unshaven, his eyes exhibiting significant strain. He had traversed the distance from the suburbs in complete desperation. "Please," he uttered, "the ceremony occurs tomorrow." I shifted position, permitting his entrance. He surveyed my restricted surroundings, the window facing the parking structure, the narrow cooking space, the workstation featuring the document repository, and for a brief moment, an expression resembling authentic shame crossed his features. It dissolved rapidly. "You lack the moral authority to inflict this scenario upon me. The process is finalized. The property was liquidated yesterday." His features exhibited complete shock, opening and closing textlessly. "Liquidated to which entity?" "A couple seeking relocation. The formal finalization occurs tomorrow. Tomorrow constitutes my ceremony. I maintain complete awareness of that factor." He supported himself against my workstation furniture, appearing unstable. Our mother would experience profound shame regarding your conduct. I observed my sibling, the younger individual I had nourished, financed, housed, and shielded for 10 continuous years, standing within an environment a fraction of the size of the estate I had secured for him, claiming our deceased parent would feel shame. Mother would experience shame regarding both our trajectories, I countered, but I am not the individual operating a grand deception. His expression transformed completely, the superficial appeal evaporating instantly as if all external power had been severed. I will announce to every individual that you lack mental stability. I will inform Clara that you are consumed by resentment and bitterness, attempting maliciously to compromise my existence. Communicate whatever narrative you select, Julian. The Public Registration Office preserves the authentic reality. It constitutes entirely open data. He departed, closing the entrance with sufficient force to disturb the security mechanisms. I secured the lock behind his departure, returned to my workstation, accessed the corporate financial files, and resumed my professional obligations. There was work to be completed. Saturday morning arrived, presenting an immaculate summer climate in the highlands, temperatures reaching comfortable levels early. It was the specific variation of day that clarifies why individuals select this region for relocation. In the suburbs, Clara was preparing within the primary suite of a structure that possessed less than 12 hours as my legal property. Her sister managed her styling, her mother prepared the wedding attire, and the women shared laughter and emotional reflections, documenting the progression. I envision it was spectacular, because Clara merited an unblemished morning. In the city, I focused entirely on my profession, managing Saturday clients, 2 independent enterprises requiring immediate monthly reconciliations. Seated at my tax office workstation, I processed financial statements, analyzed banking registers, consumed black coffee, and consciously excluded the suburban oak tree from my thoughts. The broker transmitted an update at midday, sold indicator being positioned at 5 this evening. The operational team will execute the placement. I replied with a single acknowledgement, understood. The ceremony commenced at 3, a timeline I verified because Clara had displayed the schedule online weeks prior. 3 o'clock, the commitment, accompanied by an emotional emblem. Precisely at 3 on a Saturday afternoon beneath a mature oak tree in an outdoor space that belonged to me for 2 subsequent hours, Julian and Clara exchanged their legal vows. Commitments were stated, tokens exchanged, validation achieved, and celebration ensued. Her mother wept, her father offered validation, her sister scattered petals, and the photographer captured every single component: the structure, the landmark tree, the seating, the couple, and the golden illumination filtering through the foliage. They formalized their relationship within a space I completely financed, beneath a landmark I selected during a viewing I attended entirely alone, before a structure secured with 8 years of my existence. And not a single individual seated in those white arrangements possessed the awareness that the woman who legally owned the entire reality was 68 miles distant, inputting operational receipts into a corporate ledger.